Okay, hey everyone. So my name is Al Thumm. I'm the director of Orchid of Redemption and Lamplight Forest. And I'm just starting this video series just to sort of start having a conversation out there. A lot of my game development, for various reasons, happens behind closed doors. I believe in keeping things secret, even though, there's a lot of sort of common wisdom out there in the industry that, no one's going to steal your idea. I think it's not as simple as that. But at the same time, I don't want to breed any, paranoia about people stealing ideas. But the truth is, when it comes to game development, it's easy to steal an idea. So, a lot of what I do has to stay. Well, I choose to keep a lot of it under wraps as I'm developing and pitching stuff a lot, pretty much constantly. So it's always a tricky balance. I don't keep things 100% under wraps, but I do like to keep a lot of secrets. So this is sort of just helping me to be able to have a broader discussion for that reason that I can't be posting in development gameplay videos every couple of days or every week, and also to just mix a bit of sort of game development in with just games that I enjoy playing and that give me inspiration, and that I enjoy talking about and enjoy thinking about in terms of game development, but also just as a player. So yeah, just to help me sort of walk that line a bit. Sometimes it's good to say I'm just going to be a player now. I'm going to switch my game developer brain off for a while. So that's where I'm starting with this today. I'm not going to show you any game development. In later videos, I will. And I'm going to use my current early access game, Dream of the Starhaven, as like a vehicle for that, because Starhaven is already in early access. It's a game that, while it has surprises in it, there's nothing that I need to keep secret. It's all... it wasn't built for that purpose, but it serves that purpose really nicely. That I'm never going to be pitching it to publishers. There's nothing about its development that is, so groundbreaking that I need to keep secret or anything. So it's just, I'll be able to show actual in development stuff that I'm doing inside Unity. I'll be able to show you code. Sometimes maybe working through stuff in Wise as well. And all of that kind of thing. So, but for today, I just really wanted to get started, and, I'm the kind of person who, if something is not in my day-to-day schedule of things that I normally do, then I will kind of put it off until it's the perfect situation, which never happens. There never is any perfect situation. So, this is as good a time as any just to get started and not wait for some kind of perfect circumstance. So what I'm going to do is just talk about something, maybe a few things that I've been playing, but I'm going to focus on one particular thing because I'm also very much a tangent kind of person. So because I'm not... This isn't an interview or anything. There's no one to ask me questions to get me back on track. So I'm going to basically focus this conversation around one particular game that I've been playing, because I'm bound to go sort of on tangents from there, and then I can bring myself back to that particular point of focus. So there's a bit of stuff that I've been playing recently. I'm trying to get better as a developer at playing things through to the end. you know, to be honest, not everything's worth playing through to the end. So if I don't think I'm getting much out of an experience, then I won't bother. But it's never an easy call. You know, it's like it has to be an intuitive call, not a like intellectual one, because you know, like anything, sometimes, you know, game development is difficult, and sometimes things, you know, games can take a long time to play, and sometimes things don't kick into gear until a few hours in. And I think, you know, because I've been playing games for so long now, since the early 90s, really, it used to be maybe a bit easier to tell, like, you know, in the grain of the thing what contained the seed of what that whole thing was, you know? So in the moment-to-moment interactions, you could get the gist of what the whole game feels like. And I think that's always going to be true, you know, forever. But there are certainly things that you can't tell straight off the bat from that. You can tell straight off the bat what the vibe of something is, right? It's very, very rare, and it would probably be only in very art house games where the game starts with the vibe being one thing and then is completely something else, you know? The only one off the top of my head I can think of that's like that is Frog Fractions. And I loved Frog Fractions, like, for doing that, taking me on that journey. But yeah. So generally speaking, there's an element, I think, always of that, you know what you're going to get. But there is that thing, you know, it's a common conversation that happens now with AAA games of like, oh, you've got to play it for 10 hours until it gets good or whatever. Which is a shame, but I do understand that. I played through Horizon Zero Dawn recently for the first time, and it's the first AAA game that I've played through to the end for a long time. Oh, actually, no, it's not. It's the first one I liked. But that did have that kind of thing of like, there was some stuff at the start that I didn't have context for yet. And I was kind of like, is this what the game is? You know? The like texture of the vibe of the game was good enough for me to keep going. But there was, you know, some stuff in the combat, and it's an odd choice, but I get it, why they introduced the I can't remember what it's called. It's not the slow motion focus, but it's the electronic vision thing that you have. Yeah, there's like this whole tutorial as a child. It's one of like the first things in the game where you play as Aloy as a child, and it tutorializes that whole vision thing, which I thought was weird because it's not like the primary mode of interaction in the game. But I definitely did have this thing of like continually forgetting that it existed and having to remember to use it. And so I do wonder if when they were playtesting it, they were like, players aren't remembering that this thing exists, so we really need to hammer it home. So maybe that's why they made the tutorial around it such a, you know, key, like it's a big thing at the start of the game, like stop and pay attention to this thing. Yeah, I don't know. So for that and many other factors, that's just one of those AAAs that has a very slow start. Not necessarily a slow start, but it doesn't give you all the things that are like, oh, this game is great, or this game gives me a treasure trove of things to play with and things to work out my own way of doing things, that it doesn't give you all those right away. which, I mean, no AAA game can, because they all have so many mechanics packed in there, so they can't just dump them all on you at once. But it's always a question of, do they give you the fun stuff to do early enough? And that was a bit of a question mark for me at the start of that game. Anyway, so how did I get onto that? So what I wanted to focus things on, though, was or is Lorelei and the laser eyes. And I think this represents something interesting that I've been struggling with in terms of making puzzle games. And obviously, Simogo, the developers of Lorelei, have been going consistently. I don't know if they're going strong. I imagine that they are. I think they have an ongoing relationship with Annapurna. If I remember that correctly, that they have a deal to do the next few games, so Lorelei and the next couple after that. I could be wrong about that, but anyway, I mean, Simogo's been going strong for, I don't know how long, definitely more than 10 years now. But something about the way that Lorelei works kind of embodies, or at least the way that I perceive the game embodies something tricky about what I've been trying to work through, which is I won't go too much into my side of things for like in terms of my game, but it's basically just this sort of question mark of breaking down a simple unit of interaction and saying that a complex whole has been created out of a simple unit. So it's like the ant thing, and I'm not sure if this is true biologically speaking, but my understanding of ant behavior is that, and if it's not true, it doesn't matter. It's a useful metaphor anyway. But that the ant colony creates complex behavior as a whole by having simple individual units of behavior, right? So each ant doesn't do anything complicated or communicate anything complicated to each other ant. They just have a simple, I don't know what you would call it, but they just have each one has a simple mode of interaction. But in the aggregate, when you add all of that up, it can create complex behaviors. And so that concept can be a really useful thing for designing puzzle games that are focused on a simple, recognizable thing. Like, this is the thing that this puzzle game is about. And all you can do is this simple thing. But by doing it in all these different contexts, or by taking it in this direction, you can create a complex aggregate. And there's tons of puzzle games that do that. I mean, just the medium of Sokoban itself is amazingly good at that, because most Sokobans, unless it's a particularly elaborate one, which I've never played a Sokoban with elaborate controls, but I'm sure there's some out there. But most Sokobans, make the most of the fact that you can just have a 4-directional input, and sometimes like an extra button for picking things up or whatever else, but usually just a 4-directional input and not much else. And you can just do a huge amount with that, more than most other genres of game. Not all other genres, obviously, but most other genres, you need more than that. Right up to AAAs where you using every single button on the controller and all different combinations of all those buttons and whatever. So in puzzles that I've been developing and in a couple of Sokobans that I've been working on, I've basically sort of looked at Sokoban generally as like a unit of interaction. So here's the avatar, and here's all the things that the avatar is in relation to, and what is possible in that space, and then just sort of evolving what is possible through the development process. And that, that's been interesting to me. I mean, I really love Sokobans. I think there's so much possibility to bring them more into other contexts, the way that, say card games have, for example, where you have like a card game in Final Fantasy or in a Witcher game or whatever. Sokobans are perfect sort of puzzles that could act as mini games in larger contexts. And that's actually something that I'm doing with Dreamhaven at the moment. Probably in a fairly simple way. I don't want to blow out that process of making 100 different puzzles in that game, because it's not really, it's meant to be something short and simple. But Sokobans are not publicly in the game, but they are in my build of the game now, and it really works beautifully. So yeah, that's something that I've sort of been puzzling over with this reaction to one of my other puzzle games that to me the simplicity of Sokoban is an affordance to say something more in depth by evolving a lot of different things in there. And I've had so much trouble communicating the value of that to people. And I know that it's not, because Isles of Sea and Sky is out there, and I know that that's had a great reception and people understand that game. And that does a very similar thing. My Sokoban and Isles of Sea and Sky have a very sort of comparable set of affordances. Like the Sokoban mechanics, they both have like a broad set of Sokoban mechanics, but they drip feed them to you so that you're not overwhelmed with 100 different mechanics at once. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. And I think there's other sort of framing factors at work there in the what my game looks like and what the narrative of it is, etc. So getting back onto Isles of Sea, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. So what's interesting about that is this factor, like I was saying, of the ant behavior. So in Lorelei, that manifests as the game has a very simple unit of here's what you're trying to do. So in that game, as far as I've played anyway, which is I think about a third of the way through probably, your 99% of your objectives are this thing has a lock on it, find a way to unlock it. And the game doesn't make any it doesn't try to hide that fact, but it also makes clear the fact that that's just a a convenient vehicle for these puzzles, right? But at the same time, it is what it is. It's a bunch of doors with locks on them. And so that in itself is interesting. And if the game was shorter, then that decision would have been lazy and unimaginative. But because of the length of the game, and because of a lot of other things that the game does well, for me it took a while. But I having played Simogo stuff before, and I really loved Device 6 when I played that a long time ago. I kind of trusted that they were going to take this somewhere interesting, and definitely the atmosphere is there from the start. I mean, again, it's like a classic setup. You kind of get a mysterious call to a mansion where there's like a crazy old man who wants you to do something mysterious. It's kind of a classic murder mystery setup or whatever. But yeah, it works, and it's in the context of a lot of other things happening at the same time. So yeah, I sort of struggled at first because I thought once I was confronted with the first handful of puzzles, I kind of was just like, these aren't gamey puzzles, right? These are puzzles that don't particularly care about, they don't have dynamic interaction. There's no juice. There's nothing that's particularly gamey about these puzzles. Most of these puzzles you could print in a puzzle book. I mean, and there are literally puzzle books in the game, and you could just do them on paper. Like, it's not taking advantage of the fact that it is a video game to do these things, which is true if you take the puzzles as themselves. But again, it's all happening within a larger context. So anyway, but I kind of put that judgment aside and was just like, well, I'll just experience the game for what it is. And it's not that I wasn't having a good time with it anyway. And so one of the equally significant things is what is the flow of this game, which is important for any game, and important in a different way for puzzle games, because you can get very like, I'm trying to force the solution out of my brain, and that can happen, and you need to go for a walk, or you need to sleep on it or whatever, and then you come back to it with fresh eyes. And in some puzzle games, it's just like, yeah, you need to just stop and walk away. So in Lorelei, it's less about that, and it's more about you're opening up more and more pathways, through this mansion. And if I can't do this thing, one, I don't know if I have enough information to do that thing yet anyway. And two, if I do have enough information, and I can't figure it out, can I go and just do something else for a while in the game? Try and go and solve something else and then come back to that later. Which might also be part of the larger information thing of like, I did have the information, but I didn't know what kind of information I was looking for yet, because I wasn't as well versed in the language of how puzzles work in that game. And that's one of the things where, as that becomes more and more apparent, then you can start to be like, well, now I can forgive how like first thought a lot of these puzzle designs are, because it's less about the individual puzzles and it's more about how they're setting you up to interpret that aggregate information, which is in a way kind of a way of saying, like, how do they get you into the mindset of the developers, the people who designed these puzzles, right? They're speaking a particular gameplay language to you, and they want you to get into that mode of that gameplay language, right? Of like, here's the things that you've got to notice, and here's the things that you need to notice are probably veiled under one or two layers of information. And here's the foundational information that we gave you early in the game. So remember to apply that whenever you see, you know, blah, like whenever you see Roman numerals, remember to apply that foundational information that we gave you, and this kind of thing. And so that sets up a rhythm and an interesting flow to the game. So I haven't been stuck on anything for too long, and I'm sure a lot of other players have had this experience as well of even if on some level they're finding it a bit dry, they're finding individual puzzles a bit dry, the game keeps moving you along, right? And it would have been much more difficult for the developers to do that if the individual puzzles had been really in depth, because it would have taken a lot longer to get the game to a point where they could start testing it with people and start to see how that flow is working. So that's a really interesting problem. And, you know, that's why something like The Witness takes, I mean, for many reasons, but why it took so many years to make and such an expense. Because, yeah, you can't just sort of throw those puzzles together and then get people experiencing the aggregate flow of them. Just, you know, you can't just do that in a week or whatever. So that is really interesting, because coming back to my puzzle game, which I've been trying not to mention the name, but I don't know why. I don't think it matters. So Afterlight Fades is the game that I'm talking about, which there's no demo or anything of it publicly available. But I've been working on it for a while. I've had some public play testers of it. So I know that in the right hands, it's a really deep and rich experience. But it's my first Sokoban, so I'm going to release it as the nature of the game that it is, right? But I understand the mistakes that I've made. And that is, so this thing that I remember from, I did a music degree and I did composition as like a sub-major. So I'm not a composer at all, but I was interested in doing that, and I thought, you know, maybe it's out of my comfort zone, and it was a great choice. Like I loved studying composition, and it was out of my comfort zone, and I was constantly struggling to keep up, but in a good way, that it was just like expanding and expanding me. And one of the things that always stuck in my mind from that was this thing of like, I can't remember who said it, you know, one of the tutors, I think, said that they consistently see this thing with like young composers where, you know, when they get this opportunity to have a work showcased or to do a big work for an orchestra or whatever, then they get all excited and ambitious, and they just take all the ideas that they've got and just throw them all into this one composition. And so I do see that Afterlight Fades has this thing. So I celebrate it as like a maximalist thing. You know, I'm not a 20-year-old man anymore, so I can't like blame it on age. I can't blame it on youth, but yeah, like I said, as my first Sokoban, I am aware that there's an element of like, okay, I've just taken all the Sokoban ideas and just thrown it into this thing. But the other quote that really stuck in my mind from learning composition was one of my tutors said he was having this conversation with his brother, and they're both, composers and musical experts and whatever. And this question just came up, like how simple can a piece of music be? Like, is there a point at which a piece of music is so simple that it can't be good anymore? Was the gist of the conversation. And it was basically communicated to us in the context of like, well, of course not, but it's such a great question to ask, right? And of course the same, goes for any piece of art.